You are now entering a dangerous liberty zone where God-given natural rights are held sacred and exercised. This is your warning. Tyranny, fascism, and censorship will not be tolerated. Ideas will be exchanged freely. Rigorous debate and open discourse is encouraged. If you are weak and your beliefs are fragile, you should leave now. Prepare yourself. We are now live on the Dangerous Liberty Podcast.
All right, folks. Happy Monday out there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Dangerous Liberty Podcast. We got a great guest for you tonight. We got a lot of things to talk about, and I've actually been really excited to talk about this particular topic, which a lot of it will be Thomas Crooks. I think we need to update on that information, and this is just the man to do that. I want to say hi to everybody out there that is jumping in right now. We got Lori Matthews, Con. We got, Melissa Walker. Thank you for becoming a new member. If you guys want to support us, we do have members. Actually, I don't even know if that was correct. Let me see. One of these. Yes, it was her. I looked at the wrong thing. So if you want to become a member, that does help support us. That's something we just started. We've been putting a lot more time, effort, money into this channel and covering not only Charlie Kirk, but a lot of other topics. And we want to continue to do that. I think there is a need for that. And I feel like that's what I'm supposed to be doing, to be honest with you. So want to say hi to everybody over in the comments, but also I'm just glad to be able to live stream tonight. So we had a 24-hour ban, apparently. That's how long it lasted. They pulled down one of our live streams. And then we contested that. We won that appeal, but they forgot to flip the switch to allow us to live stream the next day. So anyways, we're back at it. Real quick, just throwing out some of the normal rules. Disagreements welcomed. We want you to challenge us and talk about other things, but what we're not going to tolerate is name calling or any nonsense. If you can't be respectful, this isn't the place for you. Look, we live stream these so that you can jump in on the conversation. We're not going to put it with trolling. We're going to treat you with respect. We expect the same from you. Ken and I are going to talk for a while, just like a normal podcast, and then we will definitely get to your live questions. We will prioritize super chats. If you guys want to invest in us, we're going to make sure that we make sure that your questions or your comments are heard. Again, if you want to support the channel, you're welcome to become a member. Make sure you like, subscribe, follow us on Twitter, X now, and Instagram, and all our other social media is down below. But without further ado, welcome to the show, Ken Silva. Welcome, man. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate you coming on, man.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
AKA JD Cashless. I don't know which one is the pseudonym, whether it's the Ken Silva or the JD Cashless. But anyways, you've been on Twitter for a long time. I've been following your work. I know that we crossed paths many times during the Butler and the attempted assassination on Trump. One of the things that I've noticed and I've always respected about you is that you're very factual. You kind of, and smartly, well, I'll just say this. You seem to follow evidence. You seem to approach everything with some logic and just good common sense. And so I appreciate you coming on. And I know you've been covering Crooks. And with all that said, take it just a second and kind of introduce yourself to everybody, if you will.
Well, yeah, first of all, thank you for the kind words. I kind of just approach these cases as an old school reporter. I've been working as a journalist since about 2013. I started off in Ohio, working for a small community newspaper in Lorain County. Spent about 8 years in the Caribbean, working for local newspapers in the BVI and then Cayman Islands. And then, I kind of had hopes and dreams of like working for the New York Times or Wall Street Journal one day. So I was kind of trying to keep my nose clean, stay out of right-wing media, or not out myself as a libertarian. But once COVID hit, I figured I got to kind of, figured that career path was kind of closing. I got to join, report on what I really care about. And so I joined the Epic Times. I did that for almost a year. And then I wound up at a small site at Headline USA, which I now run. And I really didn't get into conservative media until like late 2021. So I missed like Russiagate, COVID, the 2020 election. I kind of just, all those issues, I was consuming media, but I didn't really do any groundbreaking stories. So when the Trump assassination attempt happened in July 2024, I was pretty much on Twitter. I jumped on it like 5 minutes after it happened, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be my story. I'm going to try to lead all other reporters on this, and I've been pretty much reading, writing, or covering it every day since then.
And you actually are in the middle of writing a book for that, right?
Yeah, and that should hopefully be out by the end of the year. We're publishing through the Libertarian Institute, which, if you're familiar, it's run by a guy named Scott Horton, who's written a bunch of books on foreign policy, and he generously agreed to publish this one. So it's going to be called The Plots to Kill Trump, What the Investigations Missed and Why It Matters.
Awesome. Well, definitely when you're ready to release that, we'd love to have you back on and talk about that. I want to send you money for a signed copy. I want one of the first copies, and that'd be really cool. And I'm looking forward to reading that. I don't even know where to begin with this, man. Number one, I just want to address a couple of questions that I saw over here, asking about the Harpole interview. Folks, I wanted that done. Really, I wanted that done by Friday, just with the amount of editing that it's been taking. And what I mean by editing, we have 3 cameras. I don't have a super soundproof studio. So the point being is there's a lot of cuts. It's just taking longer than we expected. I thought for sure we were going to have it out by yesterday. It will be out, already confirmed, by 4 p.m. tomorrow. So we will be dropping that at 4 p.m. tomorrow. Trust me, there is no one more anxious to get that out than me. I look forward to you seeing that, hearing that, and I think you're going to get a lot of information out of there that you didn't get out of the Sean Ryan show. Just like I told everybody, I took notes. I watched that Sean's interview of him Friday night when it was first released on his Patreon, and I went through, took notes. Fortunately, I was able to interview him the Sunday after that, so I avoided duplication, and I asked a lot of questions that Sean didn't, and I think you'll get a lot more information out of it. So tomorrow, 4 p.m., that's when we plan on dropping that, and I'm glad that you're as anxious about seeing that as I am. All right, let's get into the Thomas Crooks. So I don't know. I'd hate to assume that everybody knows as much as we think they do. So let's take everybody back, I guess. And I guess in your own words, Ken, as you see it and as you see the facts, how that day played out, just a quick summary, and then we'll kind of get into some of the lesser known facts, I guess. But I think there's a lot of people out there that just don't. I think they've heard a lot of headlines. They may have heard a little bit of stuff on social media, but let's start off with July 13th, before we knew anything that was going to happen, and kind of take it from there. I think that's a good place to start.
Oh yeah, sure. And that's actually the first chapter of my book, is almost hour by hour, minute by minute, kind of action scene starting from the morning of July 13th, where a site agent, she shows up. I think it's Meredith Bank was the one, and she's actually that lady that ended up fumbling her gun. But she shows up, and she's opening up the farm show, and she notices that her counterpart, the Mio Perez, wasn't even there. A lot of the agents were rumored to have been drinking out late in Pittsburgh the night before at a club called Tequila Cowboy. So she's kind of grumpy about that. 10 a.m. rolls around. Finally, everybody shows up. They have a briefing with the local Butler ESU, and a lot of people talk crap, saying this wasn't really a good briefing. Don't have a lot of details on what was said. But finally, everybody starts, taking their stations. It's really hot out. I guess people might be dealing with hangovers, although that's not really confirmed. And then, fast forwarding to around 4:30 is when some local cops inside the AGR building first say that they saw what we believe to be is Thomas Crooks milling around outside. But the weird thing about that is that all Crooks is also seen at one point when the locals say they saw him. He's also on the other side of the farm show. So there's kind of some mystery about who exactly these local cops first saw. So they see him again, I think maybe like a half an hour later. And this is when they finally decide to spread the message, send a bunch of texts to all the other snipers. I don't have the timeline exactly memorized. I kind of have it. It's been a couple months since I wrote this chapter, but the Secret Service finally gets note maybe around like 5:40. They still don't like. There's not much of a sense of urgency. I think the guy inside the command post passes along the word, but then he claims that he never heard about it again until shots were fired. Eventually, the locals express more of an urgency. One of the guys says, "Oh, he's seen with a rangefinder." They actually start chasing him in the minutes up to 6:11 p.m. when the shots were fired. One of the local cops tries to climb up on the AGR roof, says that Crooks turns to him, points his rifle to him. The local cop drops down. Crooks turns. He gets off 3 shots, then 5 shots, and then it was actually a local cop from the ground who immediately returned fire. And we believe the shot must have done something. It didn't kill Crooks, but it either hit his rifle and made him stagger, or it just scared the shit out of him. And then he stopped firing after that. And it's like a whole nother 10 seconds later is when the Secret Service sniper finally puts the 10th shot, that kill shot, through Crooks's neck.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. As a matter of fact, I'll have to share with you. I did a post analysis. I think the medical exam on that was wrong. If you look at the medical exam, I do think that, again, Crooks was looking this way, and the cop on the ground shot this way. It actually broke his stock. I believe it broke his stock and went through the stock and actually hit him in the shoulder. And there's an X-ray from the medical exam that actually shows a fragmented round in the shoulder. And that's not indicative of a 300 Win Mag. That is indicative of a 223-556. And I think, and I forgot, I have to go back. I literally made a video of it. And I have notes.
Yeah, I watched it at the time.
Yeah.
I remember.
Yeah. So, I talk about that, and I think the medical examiner got that part wrong. I think he basically said, if I remember correctly, that he felt that those were fragments from the 30 caliber round that the Secret Service shot. And there's just, the trajectories don't line up. It doesn't even make sense. So anyways.
And then he lets the body be cremated with the fragments still inside. So we'll never know. It's a pretty egregious mishandling of evidence, I think.
I couldn't agree more. And I think, so let's talk a little bit about, we have this new revelation to come out. I don't think it was a huge revelation for a lot of people, because I know Miss Jane Doe, Miss Jane Doe on X, and Piper and you have been working some of this social media stuff for a really long time. And unfortunately, you guys didn't get the credit that you deserve. And now we have Tucker break this story. And I believe, was it Laura Loomer as well?
Actually, a friend of mine, Brianna Morello, she's an independent reporter, but she does a show on InfoWars. She also got it. And then it was Miranda Devine from the New York Post also got it. Yeah. The weird thing about this is apparently a source got all this data and is having his lawyer or her lawyer pass it to these reporters. And I believe that's because they had to have hacked Thomas's Google account, because this has like his YouTube search history, which isn't something that you could just scrape via like open source methods. You would actually have to have access to his account. And when I looked at the Google account, if you try to get in, it's like linked to his email. And if you try to log in, it's 2-factor authenticated to his dad. So I don't think his dad would be giving up this information about like his son being a crazy psychopath. I think it had to have been a hacker. The last thing I'll say about, how this evidence was unearthed in the first place is really bizarre. It was first given to Candace Owens in September, and she goes on her show and she says, I got this dossier about Crooks's activity. She plays that video of him dry firing his pistol in his room, and she promises that she's going to release it the very next day. And then she just never talks about it again. And then, like, 2 months later, Tucker Carlson gets it. So it's very bizarre.
Hold on, let me ask you. So Candace Owens plays this in September. Was that before or after the Charlie Kirk assassination?
It was after. It was actually almost like a throwaway comment on one of her episodes about Charlie Kirk. She's like, oh, by the way, I got this giant dossier on Thomas Crooks. She plays the video, and she shows some of it, some of the comments of where it's like his violent rhetoric and all that. She promises it to release it on her website the next day, and then just never talks about it again.
That is really weird. So you've had time to go through this, and I know you've made some posts and things like that on X about this. So walk us through what you think. Of course, we have this mysterious character, Willie Tepes, and this is one of the things I actually was talking about this right after Butler. Like, I was talking about the fact that I think that this guy was somehow targeted, and by this guy I mean Crooks. I think he was targeted and radicalized online, and I thought it was really weird that we weren't getting any information, or we were being fed misinformation from the FBI, specifically Ray, at the time about his online history. We had, first they came out and they said that he was a right winger, which apparently at one time he was. But we also, I don't remember what it was. And again, this is, when we're dealing with something over a year away. But there was some other information that came out that was very clear that he was not necessarily a right winger. And the fact that he tried to kill a Republican presidential nominee. I mean, that's also the FBI would call that a clue. So the point being is we were getting this misinformation right off the bat. And from your perspective, this Willie Tepes, like, what do you think was actually going on there?
Yeah, and the history of that is it was Paul Abbott, the then deputy director. He goes up to Congress and he tells that we have these comments. We're pretty sure it's Crooks, but we're not 100% on it. That he's making anti-immigrant and anti-Semitic comments. And I believe what's been unearthed recently is probably what he was referencing, because it seems similar. But after he made that statement, you had the CEO of Gab, Andrew Torba, say, no, I got a letter from the FBI about Crooks seeking info on his account. And in fact, he was a liberal. And so, fast forward another year and a couple months later, and these comments finally emerge. They're from when he was like 16 and 17 in 2019 and 2020. So, if they shed light on his motives, that's unclear, but it's something. So, yeah, he starts out as a hardcore right winger, calling for like the deportation of Ilhan Omar, calling for like death to the leftists, kind of typical MAGA slop. And then around COVID, he flips and he's talking about, supporting mail-in ballots. Trump's an idiot. We've got a quarantine for the greater good. And then it was August 2020 is when he starts to talk to Willie Tepes, commenting under a YouTube video. And they're kind of like discussing tactics. Is it good to have an open war against the government? And Crooks is more taking the position that, like, no, we need to do stealth terrorism tactics. Like, let's secretly sneak bombs into federal buildings. So Willie Tepes, Tucker Carlson ran down the account and found it listed on a Norwegian Antifa site, warning that Willie Tepes is a Nazi and he's part of the Nordic resistance movement, which was classified as a terrorist group in June 2024. And he's like a avowed accelerationist, apparently, which is like people that seek to collapse Western society through terrorism or other methods. Again, this is like 5-year-old stuff, though. Willie Tepes has replied saying, Carlson's CIA is just trying to smear me. Interestingly, he hasn't denied actually being that YouTube account that kind of went back and forth with Crooks. But I think the significance of this is Crooks's openly violent rhetoric had to have flagged him with some kind of law enforcement agency or contractor that kind of tracks potential shooters. I mean, Bethel Park High School, where he went to school, had a shooting threat around this time. It was another kid, but I had to imagine like the school was being monitored, and I think this might have put him on the Fed's radar at that time.
Yeah, I agree, and it may have put him on a lot of people's radars. What do you think? And I know this is just speculation. I think it's obviously we know so little. A lot of it is going to be speculation. But what do you think was the motivation, or what motivated him? Do you think that there was somebody behind this instigated? Because I'll tell you this: the Willie Tepes stuff, while I find it, I don't know, interesting, I didn't see anything there, at least anything that's been released, that would be like, okay, this guy manipulated Crooks into actually doing the shooting. He was more just kind of like cheerleading on. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I highly doubt that Willie Tepes had anything to do with it, because if this was some sort of operation, I think it would be a lot higher level than just some random neo-Nazi guy hanging out on Telegram. Like if the feds were told to stand down, that's probably like pretty high level stuff. I still don't know. I've been thinking about this case literally every day since July 13th, and I still don't have a good read on Crooks. On the one hand, he does fit a profile, him being an avid gamer, spending hours and hours on platforms like Discord. I know you had a friend of mine, BX, on your show, and she explains how, these accelerationists try to radicalize certain kids to do school shootings and other acts of terrorism. But on the other hand, Crooks was like a 150 or plus IQ kid. He's not like your typical school shooter. So yeah, that's not the best answer to your question, but I just really, really don't know at this point.
Well, it does seem to be that there are lots of parallels between him and Robinson. I see a lot of similarities, both in from what we know of their personalities. They're both claim to be extremely highly intelligent. Let's talk about it on the Secret Service side. Do you feel like the Secret Service or the security detail that was there that day, were they part of a conspiracy directly? What's your thoughts on that?
Again, I can't say for sure, but it looks pretty damning to me. I mean, first of all, you had the fact that these snipers that was the first time they were ever on a candidate's detail, I believe it is. Like the first time they guarded Trump that year. And I think the first time they were ever sent for like a non-president or vice president. And so they show up, and I guess they're covering the area where the assassin, took his shots from. And I would think that if they weren't there, it would probably be locals. So there's that. And the fact that the guy who put the final shot in waited 15 seconds before returning fire and 10 seconds after the 9th shot from the local cop. And then to top it all off, when he's interviewed, this guy's name is David King. He's interviewed by Congress, and he told the House task force that I did not see Crooks until the shooting stopped. He told the Senate that, but there's some heroic Senate staffer who somehow obtained the notes that he took immediately after the incident. So the sniper goes, I didn't see Crooks until after the shooting stopped, but the Senate staffer asked, well, according to your notes, you saw him crawling into position. And the sniper didn't really give a good answer. He's kind of like, oh, by crawling, I meant just like after the shooting stopped, which makes no sense. But the senator, the actual senator or the staffer didn't really press him further. They just moved on to another topic. But to me, that looks really, really bad, and it needs to be explained further. Like if he saw him crawling into position, that's like 20 plus seconds he took before returning fire. And to me, it's just inexplicable.
Real quick, I think it's being said right now that we just got pulled off of YouTube.
Really?
Wouldn't surprise me. Yeah. Apparently we got pulled off of YouTube just now. Let me just check that real quick, folks. I am so tired of YouTube. Lives. Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. Let me go over here and check the YouTube studio, see if there is a content live. Yeah, yep, they removed it. All right, folks, I don't know what to tell you.
That's a bummer.
It is a bummer indeed. And it is what it is. It's inexplicable.
Well, that actually reminds me, I guess going back to leading up to the shooting, we got kicked off of Twitter for this video. I went on with Brianna Morello on InfoWars to do a video about how one of the Secret Service agents was on the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force. I just found that in the transcript and did a quick story on it. And this is actually a lady who was at the fence. And when the counter sniper response agent went to go to the AGR building, the lady actually sent him back to the stage and said, no, look south of the site. And we got this part covered, which I found very odd. And then when I found she was on the JTTF, I just, again, it doesn't really prove anything, but I thought it was worth a story. The point of me telling you this, though, is that got pulled off of Twitter. And that had to have been somebody making a call, I would think, because, it's the free speech app, supposedly.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, folks. A bunch of you that were just watching on YouTube are now over on another platform. I don't know what happened over on YouTube. It doesn't make sense. I don't. There's no one to talk to. There's no recourse. It is what it is. That's not going to stop us from having a discussion. What else, out of everything with everything that went on with Butler, what are some other key points that you want people to understand or that you think they should know? And then I do want to talk a little bit about Maxwell Urich for a minute, and just get some of your thoughts on him. I have my own thoughts on the whole Maxwell Urich, but what are some key points that you want to make sure that you think that people should know about Butler, the entire situation?
Yeah, sure. So the guy running the Secret Services Communications Center, which, by the way, was segregated from the locals communications center, which apparently is highly irregular. He was actually the special agent in charge of the Buffalo's field office, like a 25-year vet. His name is Jeff Burr. And he ended up making some of the key mistakes. I mean, he passes along the information around maybe 5:45, but then he claims that he never heard any chatter about a guy on the rooftop or a guy with a rifle or a rangefinder or anything like that. So he's kind of deaf and dumb and blind, and now he's retired. And that's another guy I'm kind of wondering. It's like, you're one of the most experienced people here. How could you have made, such egregious mistakes when there's people in the command center are contradicting him, saying like, no, we were talking about this in the minutes leading up to it. And he just claims total ignorance. So that's definitely another guy I would take a look at.
All right, let's talk a little bit about Maxwell Urich. What's your thoughts on, first of all, explain to everybody who Maxwell Urich is, how he got kind of swept up into this, and then kind of what the claims are, essentially that it's not Crooks, it's Maxwell Urich up on the roof. Kind of makes sense of all that.
Yeah, Maxwell Urich was initially reported as the would-be assassin. I think this originated from Roger Stone. It was like a couple hours after the incident, he reported that Urich was the suspect. And this is the guy who kind of bore resemblance to Thomas Crooks on July 13th, like a skinnier white kid with scraggly hair, although he had to have been like 10 years older. And he had a little bit of a history with law enforcement, I think in 2016, not a Trump rally, but some kind of campaign event. He was assaulted some Trump supporters, got maybe a couple months in jail. Why, how the rumor started that he was the shooter, I don't really know. You'd have to ask Roger Stone. Clearly, it was somebody told him that, though. And yeah, it kind of took off from there, just the resemblance and the fact that he kind of was like a leftist. He had a little bit of a history. And before you know it, he's kind of become a lore. I do think he's a key part of the story just because I find it very odd that he hasn't, nobody's really found him yet. So, like, I don't find it plausible that he was involved. But until we actually track this guy down and have him accounted for, I can't rule it out entirely.
Now, how did he get interjected into Butler to begin with? I know we have these reports of a white van. There's video of it being towed away. Nobody knew who it was, or so, allegedly. I think if I remember, and again, the problem is this is well over a year old now. All the details I did remember at one time have kind of been brain dumped, but there was this white van that was supposedly it was tracked down to Urich. I think that was come to find out it was incorrect. But how did he get placed, notionally at least, there at Butler?
As far as I know, there isn't any actual link. It was just like Roger Stone tweeted it out, and then it had legs of its own, and you had people spinning their own theories. I do find the van is a key part of the story too, because the bomb squad actually searched it that night. So law enforcement obviously viewed the van with suspicion, and then we haven't gotten any information since then. But as far as any ties to Urich, there really aren't any. I think it's pretty speculative. Maybe Urich might have some relatives in Arizona where the van did have Arizona license plates, but I mean that's pretty tenuous.
So it's basically another case of it was internet lore that got turned into fact over after it was said enough times. That's kind of what I've always assessed it as, right?
Yeah, that's pretty much my understanding. And you had rumors. I know, like George Webb said, him and Kenan Hooper, who was like the other guy who was arrested with him back in 2016, they went over to Ukraine, but there's no evidence of that either. It seems to be totally fabricated. Again, I just find it odd that we haven't heard from this Kenan Hooper guy either. So somebody placed that there for a reason. It was either a disinformation tactic, or maybe he was involved. He was one of the other people involved, and the feds told Roger Stone to shut up immediately after he tweeted that, because Stone got some sort of tweet or some sort of tip from the feds. I don't know. There were a lot of people that resembled Crooks. Like I said, at 4:30, when the people in the AGR building claimed they saw Crooks, it couldn't have been him, because he was actually walking around the site on the total opposite side of the farm show. And then you also had those PSP undercover troopers who were stationed at the Sheetz gas station walking around in that area. And they also had like white khaki shorts with the gray shirt. Again, it's very speculative, but it's interesting that there were like a lot of lookalikes that day.
Yeah. Well, You know, one of the things I can tell you is I did get access to the post-mortem photos of him on the roof. And unless somebody did a lot of photoshopping, it is very clear that is Thomas Crooks. And it is not Maxwell Urich. I know there were photoshopped pictures of that scene going around trying to make it look like Maxwell Urich. What do you think the motivation behind that is? In all of these cases, we see massive amounts of disinformation, mainly coming from the internet. And I don't know. I mean, of course, that information could be seeded through intelligence sources, through political forces. I don't know. There's no telling. Definitely some people out there just grifting and trying to make up, sensational stories. But where do you think some of this misinformation and why this misinformation comes about when we have these incidents, whether we're talking about January 13th, whether we're talking about a lot of the school shootings, Las Vegas, or even as recently as Charlie Kirk?
I think it's a mix. I think there's like bad actors. There's probably people getting funded or promoted by foreign governments. When it comes to Urich on the rooftop, I know you don't like Jason Goodman. I do think he's convinced because, and I believe that he believes it is Urich. And I think his reason is that he's trying to FOIA the original photo that was taken by the detective's cell phone, and they won't give it to him. And he's claiming that the photo that was released in the after action report was doctored. And I guess to his point, it is like the resolution is shrunken. I don't see any evidence of Photoshop, but I think he's saying this photo couldn't have been used for facial recognition like the cops claim it is, because it's like too bloody to actually match to like a Crooks's driver's license or something like that. Moreover, we don't have the original one, so he's actually like suing to get the original copy from the detective's phone. And because they've refused to give him that, he views that with suspicion. And, I do think they should provide the original phone from the detective, or the original photo from the phone. But I don't think you could jump to conclusions and say it's definitely Urich because they're not doing that.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I don't think that they're taking pictures of him with that cell phone to confirm it's his driver's license. They're going to take out his driver's license and look at his actual face and be like, oh yeah, this looks like him. But regardless, the biggest problem I have with that is that we know that Urich had some pretty large plugs in his ears, and he doesn't have that in that photo. You can clearly, and the weird thing is you can see what is strange is that there's blood in that area right around the earlobe. And people were trying to claim that blood on the earlobe was actually a hole. Doesn't look like a hole to me. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, and the Crooks's ear had a unique like helix feature, which is clearly present in the photo. So yeah, I believe it's him. What they did, they took a picture of that and sent that photo to like the ATF office that was supposedly doing a facial recognition match, because the ATF had pulled up some information, including like a photo, like just a portrait of Crooks. So they're going to match that with the portrait.
So they weren't doing it. They weren't doing it to confirm that it was him on his ID, is what you're saying. It was more of a national, essentially through a national database, trying to confirm who he was through facial recognition.
Yeah, that's right. And I don't know if they were successful. I do know they were able to like track the rifle to a gun store and find out that the father bought it. And they said, well, it looks like the father's son. And then apparently when they went to the house that night, they were able to confirm it. I will say I would like to see like a facial recognition analysis or something more, just to put a close to the speculation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the biggest travesties that we've seen with this is look, the case is, for all intents and purposes, closed. Like, give us all the evidence, provide us all of that information, release everything that you haven't released. There's no reason not to, and none of that makes sense. And then still, no matter what, it's clear that the FBI lied about how much of a footprint he actually had on social media. We don't know if there's more that they found. We're relying on Tucker Carlson and the reporting that he has to provide the information that we now have. Like, number one, we don't know if that's the only stuff that Tucker was able to get. There could be tons more. Could be a lot more that is available to us through in the FBI, or the FBI actually has, but we don't know. And
There's got to be.
Yeah, and the American people deserve that information, and there's absolutely no reason. And I was shocked. I can understand the Biden administration and the Biden FBI trying to hide that. I think a lot of that was them. There's two options here. Number one, it could be that they just had massive failure. I think that there was an intent to deny Trump resources for protection. At the same time, they were this is kind of a hammer, the hammer and anvil approach, where on one side, they're creating this rhetoric that is, Trump's a Nazi, his followers are Nazis. They're turning him into an existential threat. And then at the same time, denying resources to protect him. I think it is a manufactured, let it happen operation outside of any additional potential conspiracy to actually kill him or let him be killed, right? So I was expecting that the Trump administration to come in and release those documents to at least demonstrate the ineptitude of the Biden administration and the Biden FBI. And for some reason, we now have, Dan Bongino and Kash Patel essentially saying the same thing that Director Christopher Wray was saying. And that's unfortunate to say the least. Yeah,
and they're even fighting back against people like Tucker Carlson who released this information. They said, oh, well, Crooks never actually talked to Willie Tepes. It was the Willie Tepes was only commenting on what Crooks said. And that's directly contradicted by screenshots released by the reporters that got this information. And that's just bizarre. Like, why would you say such a sloppy lie? I don't know if their analysts are really dumb or what, but it reminds me, like, a month after the shooting happened, Christopher Wray briefs Congress that Crooks previewed his shooting on Steam, which is another gaming account. And then that turned out to be like a hoax. And at the time, I'm like, okay, this is clearly some sort of like disinformation optic, just confuse the public and brief Congress with false info. But now, seeing this latest round of their response to Tucker Carlson, I'm like, oh, maybe there just really are stupid people at the FBI.
Yeah, I don't know. It's disappointing to say the least, and that's the problem. Is like it's hard to figure out what the motive is. But the reality, I think, I don't even know. It's just all speculation. Let's talk a little bit about the parallels that you see with Butler versus the Charlie Kirk assassination. What's going on with that? You're essentially a full-time reporter. Let's talk about some of the ethics of the reporting that's going on, or the lack thereof, and kind of hit some of those things. So what are the main parallels that you see with Butler versus the Charlie Kirk assassination?
Well, we covered it a little bit. I mean, you got the rooftop gunman, highly intelligent kid. A lot of speculation about the motive, a lot of disinformation immediately afterwards. Unfortunately, with this Kirk case, I think the disinformation has really captured the narrative. Unlike with Butler, where that kind of died out, this has just grown its own legs. And I find that really bizarre, because I view Butler with more suspicion when you look at the security failures, whereas this, I almost more believe kind of the mainstream narrative. I mean, the kids, not the kid, but Tyler Robinson's father was the one that kind of convinced him to go to the police station in the first place. So I'm a little more inclined to believe that it actually was him, and there isn't some sort of grand conspiracy. But on the other hand, you've got the FBI secrecy. They haven't released full surveillance footage of him actually taking the shot. You've got a lot of court secrecy where they're gagging the witnesses. They held a secret hearing about supposedly whether Tyler Robinson will be allowed to wear civilian clothing in court. All the parties are trying to ban the media from, video, putting it on television. So again, it seems like there's a lot of, the government's not doing itself any favors.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'll tell you, I've said this once, I'll say it 1,000 more times, man. If they don't televise that trial, I think they can just kiss any sort of whatever tiny bit of trust and confidence that we have in law enforcement and the rule of law in the United States, and the idea that any of these agencies are have any sort of oversight by the American people, we can just forget it. You can just throw that out. So, Cash Patel, if you're watching, Donald Trump, if you're watching, I know you guys tune in every night. Man, those things better be televised for the sake of America. I'm telling you right now, the impact of that, I don't think can be overstated. It's going to be huge if that isn't televised. Yeah, one of the odd things to me at the very beginning of this is there was so much misinformation that has now been proven false. We can talk about the misinformation that the government does. I haven't seen a lot of misinformation in this from necessarily the government on this case. I've seen them withhold a lot of information, but I can't think of, other than Governor Cox, which is not law enforcement. He came out and said, hey, he caused a lot of problems with, he was the only one that's ever said, hey, Tyler reassembled or disassembled the firearm after he took the shot, which that went nuts. But there was so much disinformation coming out right off the bat that I think it's almost impossible for anyone to objectively, all the water was so muddied before people even started paying attention. Or some of that was why they started paying attention, is like, oh my God, they were using an AI video. They did this, they did that. Like, what do you think? I don't know. Like, what's that about?
The other disinformation, I don't know if I call this disinformation, but you had like Cash Patel say that, oh, we found this note under his keyboard that talks about the plan. And apparently the note had been destroyed, but they said that they were able to learn of its contents through like a quote aggressive investigative posture. So I don't know if they like threatened his roommate Lance Twiggs, and Lance Twiggs told him what was in the note, but it's like weird, vague stuff where they're not really giving us a straight story, in my opinion. That's like, I don't know if that's necessarily disinformation, but almost like lying by omission. So I know that doesn't like exactly answer your question, but yeah.
What do you feel like that the government has lied about on this particular trial, or this particular case?
Lie
or omission besides that. I mean, I think that's a great example. Like, what are some other elements you feel like aren't quite lining up with reality that the state, right now it's the Utah state, but the FBI, the state, whoever, what do you want to say? What do you feel like doesn't quite make sense to you? I'll leave it.
For one, we haven't seen a picture of the bullets that supposedly have like these inscriptions of that, like OWO and like anti-fascist rhetoric. So I don't see, why wouldn't you release the picture of the bullets? I think that's stoked a lot of suspicion. And, I've got my own theory. I think that that actually might have been the roommate that wrote that, and they want to use the roommate as a witness. So now they don't want people to compare the roommate's handwriting to the bullet casings. Again, that's total speculation. But the reason I say that is because somebody leaked photos of Lance Twiggs's journal, and one of his the things that he wrote was OWO. So yeah, presumably you'd be able to compare that to the bullet casing and see who actually wrote it. Yeah, I don't, I'm almost on the same page as you. I largely believe the government narrative. My criticism would be that I guess Trump's and the FBI's proxies have let guys like Jack Posobiec run wild and say, oh, this is like a big Antifa problem when there's no evidence of that. And now they're trying to use this to like expand the surveillance state and like fight a war on left wing terrorism when I'm not there yet. I don't see the evidence of like this being a vast Antifa conspiracy.
Yeah, no, I don't think. Look, even if this was a conspiracy of Antifa, Transtifa, or whatever else, I don't think. I think this was a fairly isolated incident, even if that's true. Even if we end up finding out there's 30 people involved, right? They all knew that was going to happen. They all gave some sort of moral and or material support to this. I don't think we need to turn that into some, government dragnet, right? Without a doubt. Like you said, I do think that Charlie was ultimately killed for one of the main things that he stood up against, and that was the spreading of trans ideology. That's something that's been very pervasive in our social zeitgeist in the last couple of years, and of course we've had laws and everything else, and I think it's a real problem. I think when we have people that what I believe are to be mentally ill, and now they're dictating laws and policies within our country, I think that's a real problem. And I think he spoke out very strongly against that, and it clearly enraged. And he was getting thousands. Literally, they've talked about him getting thousands of death threats a day. And we can talk about whatever people want to say that he thought about Israel, but the fact is the reason that he had security to begin with wasn't because of Israel going back 3 or 4 years. It was because of all the different death threats that he was getting from the left. So I do think that there is definitely some responsibility to be held by the left and whatever little pocket of the left that you want to point that to. I think primarily the rhetoric that's been going on for the last few years. He was called a racist. He was called, a homophobe, all the things, right? And I think when you do that, there's a potential that you're going to have people that take them at their word and now think that, you're a hero if you go take this person out. I think that's how some of these, and by the way, they celebrated it. There was lots of people celebrating this stuff after he was killed. So I think there's an element of that, but I do think that the other element in both of these cases that hasn't been really investigated enough, and I don't know that it ever will, is the fact that I do believe that you can profile certain people online, find them, identify them, and in a very formulaic way, radicalize them and weaponize them and point them toward a target. I think that is much more easier than actually, coming up with some grand conspiracy or where you got a patsy and multiple shooters and, you're putting a lot of risk out there as opposed to just finding 5-10 people in an area that you think that you can radicalize and weaponize, and there's no risk. And I think, going all the way back to MK Ultra, like none of those studies stopped. You know what I mean? When it comes to psychological manipulation, they've only gotten better at it. And whether that is government forces, foreign government forces, political forces, I think there's a lot of different elements that are engaging in that type of activity. And I think that's something that should be, investigated and looked at. And I think that's something we could probably look at from multiple different mass shootings. We don't have any information on these people prior to, which is a little crazy to me.
Yeah, and nowadays they can do it with bots where they don't even have to use agent provocateurs. They could just have, somebody
AI.
makes a violent comment. All of a sudden, this kid has got 1,000 likes, and that kind of encourages them to go down that rabbit hole. So, yeah, you raised definitely a valid point. I guess, to make it a little interesting, I could steelman the idea that maybe there's a foreign conspiracy. You did have guys like John Solomon, a great reporter, well-sourced, and initially report that there's a foreign connection. And then just to steelman the case that Israel might have been involved, which again, I don't think there's any actual evidence for, but apparently So the only actual evidence that Candace Owens has actually ever released was the text messages from Charlie Kirk, where he's like, they're forcing me to leave the Israeli cause. I have no choice. But apparently Andrew Colvett sent those texts to the feds after the incident. And so I guess, again, you could possibly read into it that he sent the text to the feds because he thought that might have been a motive. Again, I think it's kind of tenuous, but I'm just trying to like steel man the case for the sake of discussion.
Well, no, and I think any sort of text messages like that should be sent in and analyzed. My problem with this argument about Israel or now Bridget Macron or the French Foreign Legion, airborne, U.S. military airborne, people with maroon. Like, my problem with all this is that we're omitting a lot. And we're omitting, because the other thing that I guarantee you, Andrew Colvett turned in were thousands of emails of death threats that Charlie also gets. We don't talk about that. We don't talk about that there was a segment of the left, especially on the LGBTQ, trans, whatever, that, by the way, are militant, a lot of them. And they were also had a lot of death threats and things like that. And like, just to completely omit that. And then the real problem that I have is like, okay, we kind of start going into these what if scenarios. Well, what if Israel? Well, what if this, whatever else? And then we start out with a speculative suggestion. And then to reinforce that suggestion, we have to speculate even further and start coming up with ways to fill in the information gaps. But while we're doing that, nothing wrong with doing that. If you want to do that, that's fine. But while you're doing that, you shouldn't just completely discard, what we have as far as actual evidence. And I'm sorry, but the problem that I have with some of this stuff is like, unless we just make this up from the very bottom, which to the very top, like how are they going to explain DNA on the gun, DNA on the cartridge, on the spent cartridge, DNA on the unfired rounds, DNA on the towel that he had, the fact that his parents turned him in. And that's the one thing that I have a real problem with. Like, do you have kids, Ken?
No.
Okay. All right. So as a father, but what I can tell you though, is if suddenly I'm in protective custody or whatever else, and I hear, because I'm paying attention to this, because I just turned my son in, or whatever, and they're saying that I said that he admitted to it, and they said that I am doing all that, like they have all this evidence that I know is not true. There's nothing that would stop me from getting the word out as quickly as possible that none of that's true. If they're railroading my son on a death penalty case, I'm not waiting to the trial to get that information out. I'm going to be out there in the public as quickly as possible to refute that. And we haven't seen that. And so, like, to just completely dismiss this while we are entertaining these other ideas, which, by the way, at the same time, we're throwing a lot of accusations at people, which with no proof, which I also have a real problem with from a moral and ethical standpoint, because it's destroying some people's lives. Like, it's a real problem. And you don't just get to omit all of this and then come up with a new story every single day, which is another thing that I'm seeing one of the problems that I have, I've been watching all of Candace's episodes, which is painful. And I've been doing it at 1.5 speed, sometimes 2x. The one thing that I notice is like a new character or a new element is introduced like every single episode.
Yeah.
And it's very algorithmic, it's very systematic, and it's very suspenseful. I mean, it is entertainment at its highest level. And I got a problem with that. And I wish people would see some of these things. And here's the other issue is like, all I want from Candace is to give me some evidence. She's demanding evidence from TPUSA, which they can't give because they're under a gag order. They're demanding from the FBI in the state of Utah. They can't give that because they're getting ready for a trial. But if she has evidence of all the things that she alleges, there's nothing holding her back from presenting that. And she doesn't ever. And I got a problem with that. And it's okay for me to ask questions of her, because she can ask all the questions that she wants, but she's not allowed to be asked questions without, the attack dogs getting sick on you. I don't care. You guys can come after me and continue to come after me. It doesn't matter. It's not going to stop me.
Yeah, it was fun. I listened to about 5 episodes in preparation for this show because I knew we'd probably talk about it. And one of the things that stood out to me is when she's talking about getting this email about a plane going to Delaware in a French hangar. She's like, okay, I got this tip from a guy highly placed in the military, and then I have vetted it with my own sources in the intelligence community. But it's like, okay, those sources just confirmed the email, but they didn't tell you anything else, like beyond the email, like, who was on the plane. They just said, oh, yeah, the email, all that checks out. And that's like all you can really tell us. And then it turns out like the address that she was given was her own law firm. And then the next day she goes on and she's like, oh, everybody's saying it's a hoax, but it's not a hoax, without even addressing the fact that it was her own law firm. She doesn't even like come up with a piss poor excuse like, oh, well, yeah, it is weird that it was my law firm, but XYZ is why it still makes sense. Like, she just totally moves on. So I'm with you on that. As far as the only kind of excuse I could give for the dad turning his own son in is maybe they were under threat, like, hey, either the SWAT team is going to come in heavy, or you could turn him in, and we could do this peacefully. But then again, to your point, it's like a gag order is not going to stop me from speaking out to the media that my son's incident after that's over, So, yeah, I'm pretty much with you.
Yeah, no, like, and that's my point. I am like, if let's say I knew that my son was wanted for murder, right? And I didn't think that he did it, I'm still going to turn him in, right? We're going to go up there. Like, you can't wait for SWAT to bust down the door. I'm with everybody on that. But the moment that I hear, because I'm now paying attention to what's being said, that they're alleging that I said something in a charging document that I didn't say. And they're saying that my son admitted to something that he never admitted to. There would be no holding me back from any of that. And that's my problem with a lot of this. I don't know. Like to me, that's one of the most important points of this is, and the thing that makes the least amount of sense to me. To me, that's almost like. To me, that's the most important point, because I just find that so unbelievable. And I know what parents would do if they thought that their kids were being framed for something they didn't do. That's really what it comes down to me. And then, there's a whole list of other things, you know what? I don't even want to talk about, Candace. When it comes to you are an independent journalist. That's what you do for a living. Like, what do you suggest people out there? Because I do think there is a real need for guys like you. And I want to be someone that brings forth the truth and make sure that regardless of what everyone else is doing, this is not about clicks, it's not about likes, it's not about money. It's about the fact that we no longer have institutions that we can trust, including the media. And I think it takes people like us to hold our government institutions accountable as well. And we have a media that has failed to do that. That's what they're for. They were supposed to be an adversarial relationship with the government during COVID, during January 6th, during a whole bunch of different events that have taken place that they clearly were just a mouthpiece of the government. So for people out there that want to engage in this activity, as a journalist, what are some of the things that you would recommend?
Yeah, I feel like I'm kind of fighting a losing battle on this one. But if people, if you're brand new to these kind of issues and you don't even know where to start, triangulating your sources is a big one. Like, does the video you're watching match with what people are saying on the documents? That's a really basic thing. Like, don't just go off of one source, regardless of whether it's from the New York Times or it's from some anonymous Twitter account. Most people will give you the answer like, oh, you got to find trusted sources, but I don't think that's good, because a lot of like the big institutional media, as you said, has really dropped the ball. So it's kind of just like, thinking critically. And I don't really know how to teach people to think critically, how to spot contradictions, how to corroborate things with primary sources, not hearsay. It kind of takes a lot of thinking and like a IQ above 95 at least.
Yeah. No, and yeah. Yeah, I mean, also like if you're going to, when you make these huge, whether they're accusations or these bombshell whatever, like the bigger the story, I just think the more evidence that you need to have, right? I mean, like if you're going to accuse somebody, whether it's through innuendo, and this is another thing I'm kind of sick of. I'm kind of sick of hearing people make accusations through a question or whatever else and pretending that you're not actually accusing them and just saying, oh, I'm just asking questions. Like you're insulting. Number one, you're being a liar. You're lying. And number two, you're insulting my intelligence. Like you're not just asking a question. You directly put some sort of suspicion on this person, and you talked about what they could have done or they were likely to do or speculating all to hell and back. And then the other part of that is not giving like other options, right? It's like, okay, I think, and this is an example I've brought up before because I think it's a good one. It's like when they're talking about the guys working on Charlie behind the table, we can't see them. We have no idea. Anyone that says whatever is speculated. When they say, hey, you know what, they're killing him. I've seen people say, oh, they were back there breaking his neck. They were finishing him off. And there was other suggestions along those lines. That's fine. But if you don't also say, you know what, they could have been doing rendering first aid. They could have been doing that. Like if you don't at least give like some sort of balance to the discussion and you're just trying to guide, it becomes very clear that you're trying to guide people along a narrative. That's where I have a problem with. And by the way, that's exactly why mainstream media failed. That's what MSNBC did. That's what CNN did. They told you what you wanted, what they wanted you to hear. They omitted all the other things that were, that could prove something else or suggest something else. And they guided you along and they got their viewers to believe X, Y, and Z. And, that's why they no longer are relevant. And I think a lot of the stuff is extremely short-sighted for people that want to, maintain a presence in the media for any period of time.
And as far as dealing with that as a consumer, again, I don't know, like study philosophy, like correlation is not causation, absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. Concepts like these will help you deal with just kind of sifting through a lot of the slop, I guess. But a lot of people don't really want to take the time. So, as far as I'm concerned, I'm just going to keep plugging away, keep reporting, my style, providing evidence for pretty much everything. Like I don't go off of anonymous sources unless I already have a story. I have all the documents and records to support my story. And maybe I'll have like an anonymous source like in the 10th paragraph to help explain and supplement what's going on. But if you ever see a story hinged on a single anonymous source, that's another reason to be dubious. And I'm just hoping that maybe like the Twitter will become so unusable that things will start to decentralize and people will actually try to search out for individual specific trustworthy sources and people they could rely on because, the algorithm ain't working.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the sensationalism gets clicks, likes, and views, unfortunately. And then what happens is, because these people, they get clicks, likes, and views, they get affirmed in really bad actions and they continue to do them and continue to do them. They build these large audiences. And now, at some point, those people, and it's not just Candace, it's many others, these people can do no wrong. And if you call them out and ask them questions and ask them for proof, all these people attack you and your motives and everything else is a little crazy. A little messed up.
It is. It's so crazy. It's like, again, not to harp on Candace, but we're talking about a former liberal who ran a doxing site, and then she gets kind of doxed herself. So all of a sudden she joins the right, gets hired at Daily Wire, works at PragerU, all these giant institutions, eventually like marries a millionaire, and now she's got her own independent show. Who knows who's funding her? But if like little old me questions her, I'm the disinfo op. It's just incredibly ironic that people can't like see who's who.
Yeah, no, it is a little crazy. Well, what else is going out in the Ken Silva sphere?
What else? Yeah, I don't. As far as the book going, it should be out in about a month or so. We've got a chapter on Ryan Ruth. I don't know if you want to get into that at all. His trial just wrapped up. He was found guilty. He was the guy who was hiding in the.
Let's talk about that. That's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, so he's another one that he's kind of a different profile from Crooks or Robinson. I would almost compare him to like a Lee Harvey Oswald character, where he winds up. He's like a career criminal as a younger guy. For some reason, he's committing these drastic felonies. Like in 2002, he's running a construction company and he's hiring illegals and he's not paying them. He gets into a fight, tries to run one of them over. They call the cops come, and he's like holed up in his house. He has a standoff for a couple hours. Eventually they get him to come out. They find he has illegal explosives. It's probably just dynamite he took from, for
this is back in the 90s, right? Like early 90s?
It's like 2002. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So he gets probation for that. Another 7 years go past, and he's running this scheme where he's having like drug addicts in the Greensboro, North Carolina area go to construction sites and steal stuff and then come and he'll fence it. He gets caught for that again and again, just probation. And then he winds up going to Ukraine. He's on law enforcement's radar, recruiting foreign fighters from Afghanistan and Syria. Comes back to the States, gets interviewed by customs, admits to all this, but they let him go through. He's hopping around the country, pretty much operating with impunity. And then he also comes in pretty close to assassinating Trump. Trump was on like the fifth hole of his course, and another agent was 200 yards ahead, spots Ruth, shoots, and he flees and gets caught like 45 minutes later. But besides all like the shady history of Ruth, the weirdest thing that I found in that case is that he started hiding out at the golf course at 2 a.m. according to the search warrants. That's when like his phone was pinging off the towers. And 2 a.m. was also when the Secret Service was notified about Trump's golf plans. Apparently he went to bed that night and told the Secret Service, hey, I want to golf in the morning, set up the security. And so that's just like a weird coincidence. And you can find that information in the House task force about the 2 a.m. thing. So again, that's almost more.
Let me interrupt you right there. I mean, do you think that that's just a coincidence? Do you think he'd been there many nights before and it just happened to work out that day? What do you think that is?
He was reportedly tracking Trump with a flight tracker, kind of like how these people are tracking these Egyptian planes.
Right.
And he was living at a truck stop that was about a half an hour away. But again, yeah, was he going there every day and just camping? I don't know. That's a good question. I doubt it. But because Trump he didn't have plans to golf that day. That was a last minute thing. He was supposed to go with Lindsey Graham, and Lindsey Graham actually canceled at the last minute. So in my mind, this is like almost.
There's our leak. I said, there's our leak.
Yeah, exactly.
There's our leak.
So could be a hell of a coincidence, but I do think that one's very, very suspicious.
Mm. So what do you think? Again, pure speculation. What do you think Ruth is? Do you think that's something that he's self-motivated? He was put up to this by somebody else? What's your suspicion on that?
I think he was radicalized. I obviously don't think he was like some kind of operative because he represented himself in trial. At any minute, he could have just blurted it out like, hey, I was working for the government. I think somebody put the idea in his head that, hey, Trump is a really bad guy. He's a threat to democracy. He's a threat to the world. Somebody's got to stop him. Whoever did this would be doubtlessly hailed as a hero. And it kind of put like the brain worm in him. And then he got this idea in his head that he was going to be a hero. But I do think he was probably radicalized in Ukraine. I've even tracked down one guy who knew him. I actually haven't reported this yet, but I'm talking to the guy and like he's talking about how he knows Ryan Ruth. And like 20 minutes into our conversation, he's saying how the P tapes are real and he wants to punch JD Vance in the face the next time he sees him. So like these are just kind of the people that were over in Ukraine, like just radical pro-NATO, anti-Trump people. And I think that had to have indoctrinated them somehow. Again, him operating with impunity despite multiple felonies and being on like 7 different agencies' radar, though, that is very bizarre.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't doubt that he was kind of put himself in a echo chamber where a lot of this stuff was regurgitated. But I also think that like whether you're looking at, especially during the last 10, 15 years, you can just watch a liberal podcast and you're going to hear all those things. You can watch MSNBC, you're going to hear those things. You can watch The View and you'd hear those things. So I don't doubt that, again, some of that stuff gets concentrated into these echo chambers. But the fact is that we had large portions of the Democrat Party saying and even, large politicians calling this guy Hitler and, he was a Nazi and he was racist and, he wants to put people back in chains. I mean, that's something that Biden himself said. So, I don't know. He's definitely an interesting one. Lieutenant Colonel Hunter said, Ruth, where was he getting his money? One thing I did find, because I did a background check on Ruth, and I found that he was dating like a CEO of a large company out in Hawaii. I forgot all the details of that. Are you aware of that?
Yeah, Kathleen Schaefer. She was like a upper management type of person at the Victoria's Secret branch out there, which people have like spun that into theories of like Jeffrey Epstein, Les Wexner type stuff, which is way too far out there for me. But
Sure.
It is a good question. She was financing all his trips, and he wasn't just going to the Ukraine. He was like, if you read a state search warrant, he went in 2024 leading up to his attack. He went to like Phoenix, Arizona, up to Montana. Like he was just bouncing around the country. It was very, very bizarre. And this was all funded by this fiance. They did release jail transcripts that show that he was talking to her after his attempt. And she's basically like, oh, this is the worst thing you could have ever done. So assuming that that's genuine reaction, she did kind of rebuke him for what he did. But then the other thing, where was he getting his money? In court, it came out that his sister, or his daughter got like a $200,000 deposit in her account in, I think, March 2024. And I need to go pull the court transcripts. They should be actually publicly available in the next month. But I have no idea where that money came from, or that's another unanswered question.
Well, that's interesting. I'm glad you brought that up. Folks, what we'll do now is we will open the floor up to additional questions, comments, and things like that. We'll try to go through this, and you can ask me or Ken any questions you'd like. There was a couple of comments that I highlighted over here. One of the things Donnie Mac 420 said, I believe there's a lot of people trying to get others to act on their own violent rhetoric. Doesn't necessarily have to be a 3-letter agency. I agree with that. I 100% agree with that. I do think, look, I do think there are elements within our own government and elements within other governments for sure that can absolutely, if they determine they want to cause a mass shooting or some other violent event, I think there is enough time, energy, research to where they know exactly how to manipulate people to do those things. And I think some of the events that we've seen, and again, this is speculation on my part, other than circumstantial evidence and the fact that I know that we've been doing these types of experiments for a long time, and I know that other countries have been doing this type of thing for a long time, I think it's a very real possibility that we need more information on. And by the way, it's not just government entities. It can be, there are think tanks that are involved in stuff like this, and completely non-government entities that engage in this type of activity too, sometimes for other governments, so that there's a level of separation and deniability with some of these things. So what's your thoughts on that, Ken?
Well, we have a stark example of this. Another assassination plot that I discuss in my book is that of Nikita Kasip, who was I think 19-year-old kid in the Wisconsin area. Basically was in a chat room full of Ukrainians who convinced him that he should assassinate Trump, and they would blame it on Russia and start a big conflict between the U.S. and Russia. The reason that police cracked this case is because the local police found his parents dead in his house when they finally conducted a wellness check. And he had killed his parents and stole like maybe $10,000 and a bunch of their guns. And he was down in Kansas where he was supposed to meet somebody else, and they were going to do this Trump plot. And then he supposedly thought he was going to escape to Ukraine. And this was tied to the Order of Nine Angles, which is like this accelerationist cult that tries to get, susceptible teenagers to do these type of terroristic activities. So, I mean, that's like a black and white example of what you were just talking about. To kind of, again, go back into conspiracy land, though, the weird thing about that case is that the feds did visit his house a couple years ago due to him like Fed posting, and then they didn't act. And a couple years later, his parents wind up dead, and he's part of this weird plot. But he was on the Fed's radar too.
Yeah, it wouldn't take much to convince me that our government is engaged in some of this stuff, and or that there's these LHOP, let it happen operations, LIHOP operations that are taking place. And I think there's a lot of good motives behind letting some of these types of things happen. It keeps our government agencies in power. It justifies their existence. It justifies their funding. And look, I know there's good FBI agents, there's great CIA agents. Some of them are out there doing God's work, but then we also know that there are people that are not doing right in all instances, and that goes for law enforcement in general. And I love law enforcement, but I also have a lot of criticism when it comes to law enforcement and how the laws in our country are enforced, and the constitutional violations that are just kind of standard practice amongst law enforcement. I have a real issue with that. No, that's a great, folks. If you haven't watched my interview with BX, it's on our YouTube channel. It's on our Rumble channel. Go watch that. We talk about accelerationism. We talk about Order of Nine Angles. We talk about the organization known as 764. And these are all elements that I came across and started researching. Well, here's what happened. I first came across the theory of accelerationism, and I was like, that's exactly what is happening in our society. So if you don't know what that is, go research that. And by researching accelerationism, I came across BX's work. And through that, I started watching one of her documentaries. I think she has like a 6-part documentary that you need to watch, but she has a lot of other good information out there as well. And she talks about the Order of 9 Angles and 764. And I was like, this is bonkers. This can't be true. So I went and researched those organizations individually. And folks, absolutely true. And the why we don't know about these is nuts to me. And what they're doing, how they're targeting kids online. She also has been really big on talking about exploitation of kids online through things like Roblox. Right now, there's a class action suit on Roblox for that very thing. And it's happening in all of these different chats, these different gaming platforms, Steam, you name it. So if you haven't watched that interview, it is eye-opening. It makes you a little sick to your stomach that this is being allowed to happen. And by the way, there's people getting away with all this stuff. Simultaneously, we have our law enforcement agency and the Department of Justice being directed at people that were like a block away from the Capitol during January 6th. Like a complete gross misuse and weaponization, political weaponization of our justice system, while they're letting pedophiles and all these other people get away with whatever. And it pisses me off to no end. Does it piss you off, Ken?
It certainly does, and that's one of the questions I had. And again, this lends to conspiracy theorists, and I might even include myself in this camp. Is like, how the hell did government let 764 get out of hand? I mean, I look at court documents that they had an undercover FBI agent targeting one of these kids since I think it's like 2021, and I think a non-conspiratorial explanation is that, they're too busy hunting January 6ers to give the proper resources to just tackle 764, before it kind of proliferates and gets out of control. But I almost think that's giving them too much credit. I don't know. It's just bizarre that they had an undercover in that group for so long and didn't really do anything. And this is like the lowest hanging fruit. It's very dumb kids documenting their crimes on the internet. I don't see how it takes so much to roll these groups up.
Well, I have a theory on that. I think there's larger organizations at play that are very likely using some of these smaller throwaway, whether it's Order of 9 Angles or 764. I think they're using them as cover. I really do. I think there's more. And again, this is completely speculation. This is Gary putting his tinfoil hat on and just knowing how the world works. Ken, what are your thoughts on January 6th and the January 6th bomber investigation?
January 6th, exercise in democracy. The bomber investigation, that's actually, I don't know if you know, Gary, but that's kind of how I met BX and we started working together maybe 2 years ago. She had been nuked off of Twitter, and I think her Twitch got canceled, and she only had a couple hundred followers. And I had been reporting on FBI informants in the Nazi movement, and we just started collaborating. And eventually she brings me this story about this counterterrorism analyst named Jade Parker, who claimed that she identified the January 6th pipe bomber in mid-2022. And she says this on Twitter, and then she disappears like a couple weeks later. And BX had found all of these tweets on the Wayback Machine, and she gave them to me, and I published a big story about this lady who claimed to identify the pipe bomber, and then she vanishes. So that's kind of my connection to BX. But my thoughts on it, I do think it's got to be some sort of inside job. I mean, for people who don't remember, these pipe bombs were supposedly placed the night of January 5th, and then they sat there for 18 hours until a plainclothes Capitol police officer found one at the DNC right like at 12:50 p.m., which is literally right when the mob was breaching the first barrier at the Capitol. So, you find the pipe bomb, it distracts HQ, it diverts some resources. They can't give a full response to January 6th. And I think it was a tactic that really ensured that the Capitol riot would become like this national scandal. And I do think it had to have been some sort of inside job. I just don't believe that the FBI in the most heavily surveilled city in America couldn't figure out this case.
And not only that, when they went to go find the pipe bomb, they went to the exact spot where it was. It wasn't like looking around. They made a beeline for where it was, which I thought was pretty interesting as well. No, I think you're right. My speculation on that is, the other thing that did is once we introduce a bomb, now we can label this entire event as a terrorist event. And now like all due process is gone. It's game on. We can invoke all the powers of the Patriot Act, which they did. And that's exactly what took place. We were surveilling people left and right. People that were blocks away were getting implicated. People that weren't violent that ended up walking in long after they didn't even know that it was like breached. It was, the whole thing was a setup. There's no other way around it. And then the fact, oh God, I can't believe I can't think of his name. What was the main provocateur in that?
Ray Epps.
Ray Epps. So here we have Ray Epps. He's on video inciting violence, and somehow he doesn't go to jail. All these people that did almost nothing, weren't involved, were just bystanders. They end up going to jail or put in jail without any due process for months and months at a time in solitary confinement. And where's Ray Epps? Ray Epps is out there chilling on the beach somewhere. So.
Yeah, and the other weird thing about the pipe bomb is that it might have been used as a justification to treat it as a terrorism event, but the Democrats never really propagandized that aspect of the incident. They almost buried it on purpose, which I think was because it's so suspicious that any reasonable person would be like, okay, that's got to be some sort of sketchy possible inside job. You had Kamala Harris's convoy. She goes to the DNC that morning, and the Secret Service swept the area, but for some reason didn't find this device. She passes within like 15 feet of it, leaves the building, and instead of for the next 4 years being like, oh, I was within 15 feet of death because of these evil right-wingers, she doesn't talk about it at all. And I just got to imagine that was because they didn't want the attention because it's so sketchy looking. And then as far as Ray Epps, when I did investigate him, I actually got him on the phone for about 30 seconds before he hung up on me.
Really?
I did a story, an investigator named Roger Charles, who has actually worked on Timothy McVeigh's defense team. I met him, and he did a background check on Ray Epps for me and found that he had an arrest warrant outstanding in Pennsylvania for criminal trespass, and he never showed up to court, meaning that he still technically has this outstanding warrant for him. So it's not the most groundbreaking story, but I did do that, and that's just one more data point indicating that he has to be some sort of protected provocateur, because when he finally gets charged for a misdemeanor trespassing violation in relation to January 6th, because all the public pressure, the DOJ files a sentencing memorandum, and in that memorandum, you're supposed to go through his criminal record, but it doesn't mention that he has an outstanding warrant in Pennsylvania.
How quaint. How quaint. Ken, do you agree with BX that these aren't political groups, 764, etc.? They're nihilist, no lives matter sadists?
Oh, I 100% agree. And this is like a weird analogy, but I compare it to like gangster rap. How in the 1990s, you actually had coherent songs like, fuck the police, blah, blah, blah. Like whatever you think of it, it was an actual message.
And hold on, language, or we're going to get kicked off YouTube.
Yeah, we don't want that. And so, in the 90s, you at least had a coherent rap, and now it's like mumble rap where it's like just rappers taking cough syrup and like not even making any sort of sense. And in a similar way, like in the 90s, you had coherent neo-Nazi accelerationists, and now it's just like dumbed down version of 764, just nihilism for the sake of it.
Yeah, there definitely seems to be no real doctrine behind some of this. Yeah, I don't know.
It's almost just, I think these kids do it for status. For some, it's like the Tide Pod challenge, except evil.
I agree. All right, medium. First of all, I don't wear a medium. I wear extra medium. That's what I wear. So I just talked to Kyle Seraphin today. There's a little bit of a weirdness between him and not really weirdness, just straight up beef and some controversy between him and Becca. Steve Baker, I believe they found the girl who's a pipe bomber. Now, I'll just say this. When the, what they call it, the gait analysis came out of supposedly them identifying who the pipe bomber was, we ended up doing a show and talking about it a little bit. But even then, man, I think that's just such shitty evidence. Like, I don't even know. I think they said it matched this person's gait by like 96% or something like that. And then they put up this picture of this person. I have a real problem with that because I think that analysis is trash. And I'll let you say whatever you'd like on this, Ken. I don't know what that means. And when the media and the Department of Justice starts putting out things like that incriminate people, I don't think that'd be something to be admissible in court. I don't think you should start doing that. This person could be 100% guilty for all I know. But all I'm just saying is that to me is horseshit. Like, I don't know, like how many other people would match that 98, 96%. I don't even know. Does that mean it's a 96% chance that this is her? Or is it 96% chance that this person walked like this person? Like, I don't know what that means or how definitive that information really is. But I just think that using that and then blasting that all over TV, if I was that person, whether I was guilty or not, I'd sue the shit out of somebody. Because I think that is a really bad way to go about doing things in the United States. What's your thoughts, Keith?
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what's going to happen. That person's lawyer has called the report defamatory. So I think they are preparing a lawsuit. And that's kind of my concern is they might have been onto something. I mean, you not only had the gait analysis, but you had the fact that Kyle Seraphin surveilled this lady's next door neighbor.
Yeah.
So those are two separate data points that are two coincidences, but when you combine them, like that's one hell of a coincidence where this lady who is the exact same size, exact same gait pretty much, and then they were surveilling the next door neighbors. But again, that's just total circumstantial evidence and they don't have proof. And now she could successfully sue. And now they could say, oh, we debunked the whole Fedsurrection inside job narrative. You guys are just some crazy right wingers. And, you know, this is why you need to just trust the government, trust the New York Times. So I think they almost like set up a big straw man for the feds to knock down. And that's pretty unfortunate. I don't even think they have the actual gait analysis. From what I understand, based off of statements that Kyle Seraphin made on Alex Jones's show, is Steve Baker had some NSA contractor run it for him. And so he doesn't even have the analysis himself. And so now if he does get sued, he's going to run into a conundrum. Well, do I burn my source and actually say who ran this analysis to kind of help my defense from being sued? Or do I shut up, protect my source, and get sued for like an Alex Jones $1 billion sized lawsuit? Like that's, I think, the decision Baker's going to be running up against.
Yeah, I mean, I can see them going to a judge, presenting that and saying, hey, this is for the judge to decide whether or not that's enough for a probable cause for a warrant. And then, you know, they seize this person's electronics, you know, they do a search, whatever they're going to search, right? They're going to exploit whatever the house, whatever they get the warrant for, right? And then they come back and they can find that information. but to just go public with that alone,
Yeah.
he immediately came off as like, bro, this is a hit. This is just a hit job of a piece. It's not real. It made me doubt it immediately.
Yeah. What I would have done as a reporter is I would have said, I have the gate recognition. We have a name. This is a Capitol police officer who now works at the CIA. Kyle Seraphin surveilled this person's neighbors. We have given this information to the FBI, and now they're not acting on it. And that's how I would have done the story. You don't name her. And then you could have still reported it and just be honest, like, yeah, we don't have proof, but we feel like this is in the public interest to publish and put out there, but we're not naming her because we don't have proof. But they jumped the shark. I just can't believe it. That would come from an institution with editors and lawyers that actually fact checked it. It just seems like it might go down as one of the biggest journalism blunders in the 21st century.
Well, Alex Jones may beg to differ with that, but yeah.
At least he's just one guy that's spouting off, though. This is something that people thought of for months.
Yeah, no, fair. Yeah. Alex Jones doesn't have a filter, so I can give him that. Yeah. Well, listen, man. What else you got? Anything else before we? I don't see any other pressing questions. If anyone has any final questions, throw them up there. But I think we're going to wrap this up. We'll keep it under 2 hours for a change. Anything else that you want to share with the world, Ken?
No, I'm bummed we got kicked off YouTube.
I am too.
But I appreciate you having me on. And yeah, I'll definitely send you a signed copy of the book when it's out.
Would love it. Love it. No, send me a bill. I want to help support you. Speaking of helping support you, besides going to follow you on X at JD Cashless, where did JD Cashless come from?
That actually comes from a journalist, JD Cash, who was basically the first reporter to break a lot of the key stories about the Oklahoma City bombing. He got some seismic reports that indicated there was more than one blast. He eventually went to this white supremacist compound called Elohim City and talked to a bunch of McVeigh's friends. And he did it like working with this tiny newspaper called the McCurtain County Gazette, and he was scooping the big guys. So he's kind of my hero, and just the Cashless is like a paying homage to him. I'm a poor man's version of that. I'm no JD Cash, but I try.
That's awesome. Well, that's another rabbit hole that maybe we should go down another night. I would love to have you back on. Maybe we'll talk about Oklahoma City bombing. That is a lot of strangeness involved with that, to say the least. Do you do any Substacks or anything like that? Where else can people find you at, Ken?
I have a Substack, but I'm not really active. Just headlineusa.com. To our earlier discussion about supporting independent journalism, we rely on traffic. We get about 1 million views a month, which is kind of enough to pay the bills. But we could, if you want to support, just click on our stories. That's all I ask. Not even to subscribe or anything.
Yeah, and you know what? Asking you guys to go subscribe to support a ethical, real journalist, that's not too much to ask. So go subscribe. Throw them a couple bucks every month, whatever it is.
Free.
Oh, free. You can subscribe for free. Oh my God, it's too like all you gotta do is click the button. You can do it.
Yep.
But yeah, anyways, go give them some traffic. Go share it. Share this podcast, please. We'll definitely. I'll end up reposting this podcast up to YouTube tomorrow. Man, that irritates the crap out of me. Anyways, make sure you like, subscribe for us. Go make sure you're following us on Instagram, X, Rumble, YouTube too, I guess. But all those other ones, just in case this happens again. I don't know what's going on with our live streams, but it is what it is. They don't like the truth, but we're going to keep moving along and keep telling it. Well, listen, folks, Ken, you stay there. We appreciate you tuning in. Oh, folks, Wednesday, I will have Matt Tardio on Wednesday. We're going to do a live stream. We're going to cover a lot of topics. I think you guys are going to find that extremely informative. You'll love that. So make sure you tune in Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern time. We'll have him on there. And by the way, tomorrow at 4 p.m., my interview with Brian Harpole will drop at 4 p.m. So make sure you check that out. You don't want to miss that as well. But until next time, stay armed, stay ready. We'll talk to you soon.